إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Inshallah, the next hero from the heroes of Islam course, inshallah, that we wish to cover is Shaykh Abdullah Yusuf Azzam. And like the previous hero that we covered, he is somebody who has lived within our lifetimes of many of us here. And inshallah, and he's someone who's very famous amongst the mujahideen of the world, and he is also very well known amongst the powers that be and also amongst the Arabs generally speaking. His importance, just to cover that from the Muslim viewpoint, was that as Osama bin Laden, he said the Shaykh Abdullah Azzam was not an individual but an entire nation by himself. And the Muslim nation has proven themselves incapable of giving birth to a man like him after he was killed. And as for those who know, he was killed in 1989, inshallah we'll cover that today. And also, like I said to you, wherever you go in the world, in the last 10, 20 years, any place in the world where you've gone, where there's been jihad, with sincere brothers who are willing to sacrifice, you will see that amongst people they respect the most was this man. And you'd go to certain places and all you'd hear, in the kitchens was the voice of this man. And that's how in fact some people got to know that people loved him so much, even if they didn't know him from before that. And a lot of the source that what I'm saying to you has come from a magazine that he himself established, and it's called Al Jihad, which used to tell the news of the affairs of the Mujahideen. And the issue that I've taken this from is issue of January 1990, which is a month roughly after he passed away. And in there I found a number of quotes, a number of scholars, a number of people saying, telling us what kind of a man he was. But I didn't find anything more concise to sum him up than this statement of this Afghan Mujahid that was in there. He said that كنا نشم منك يا شيخ المجاهدين رائحة السلف الصالح, that we used to smell from you, O Shaykh of the Mujahideen, the smell of the Salaf, the righteous Salaf. And we could feel in you the zuhd of Hassan al-Basri, and the fiqh of Abi Hanifa wa Thawri, and the jihad of Ibn al-Mubarak, and the bravery of Ibn Taymiyyah. And we used to see in your brightened face, the vision of Ibn Badis, who is an Algerian hero, and Hassan al-Banna, wa Sayyid Qutb, wal Mawdudi, and he numbered a few other people as well. All of these are heroes who have left their mark upon Islamic history, upon whom we respect. And the key thing that we have to stress here, and inshallah you'll see that he was a sheikh, he was a recognized scholar, and at the same time he did what very few, very very few, a handful of people have done in the last 30, 40 years, and that is he went out and he sacrificed all that he could for the deen. And even from the kuffar viewpoint, even though they hate him, okay, and if you look at the top analysts from the kuffar, how much they hate him, right? They recognize his importance. Time magazine said that he was responsible for reviving jihad in the 20th century. Some of the other analysts that have been quoted here have said that he is Bin Laden's spiritual mentor. They have said that he is the Muslim leader who's been most responsible for expanding the jihad into a full-blown international holy war without borders. It was this man, it was his thought, it was his ideology that really inspired the people. Another of the kuffar analysts, he said that he is the ideological godfather and global recruiter par excellence of Muslims drawn to the Afghan jihad. And we know the Afghan jihad, that was a school that spread the fire around the world. So inshallah, let's cover his history and talk about some of the other important aspects from his life. Abdullah Yusuf Azzam, he was born in 1941 in Palestine, in the province of Jenin, and I've heard you've heard of Jenin recently. That's where all the atrocities and massacres occurred. And he was brought up in a house that loved Islam, so he was taught adab. His father was one of the known mujahid of the area at that time, so he had that tarbiyah right from the beginning. As a young child, he showed himself to be quite intelligent, and he was known to be, at a young age, he decided that he's quite adherent to the mosque. This is one of the things people have said about him, that when he was young, he loved to be with the mosque and spend as much time as he could there. And he started to distinguish himself early from an early age, and his teachers, they recognized his excellence in this. And in an early age, he joined Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, the brothers that we talked about earlier. And like I said, since he was intelligent, that wherever he went, he would get distinctions. Okay, so even though he came from a very run-down, you could say, society in the economic sense, since he was intelligent, he was smart, he was able to show himself. After graduation, he became a teacher in a village in Jordan, and then in 1966 he joined the Sharia college in Damascus, where he obtained a BA degree in Sharia with distinction. Then in 1967, when the Jews, they captured the West Bank without resistance, i.e. the Muslims had fallen to such a level that they captured it without resistance, he decided to migrate to Jordan full time and participate in the jihad there. So this was the first jihad he did, and he participated with the Ikhwan al-Muslimin who were doing jihad from there against the Yahud in Palestine, obviously. And he participated in a number of battles. One of the battles there is called the Battle of Mashuru, in which 62 Yahud were killed. He was also honored to participate in the jihad that occurred on the 5th of January 1970. And at this time, despite him committing himself fully to jihad, he was living actually in very poor circumstances. His wife, he says to his wife later on that at this time we had 3 children, we were living in a room, and we didn't even have a kitchen. I mean, that's how poor his economic state was. But sacrifice was the key in his life, and these material things, it did not matter to him. And then after that, he went to Egypt, and he obtained a master's degree in Sharia from Al-Azhar. And in 1970, he became a lecturer at the age of 29 at the Jordanian University in Amman. And this was roughly the time when the jihad had come to a halt, because the PLO had been banned, had been forced out of Jordan. Then in 1971, he was awarded a scholarship from Azhar, and he obtained a PhD in Usul al-Fiqh, the principles of fiqh, the rulings of Islam, in 1973. So he was a recognized scholar. And it was there that he became acquainted with the family of Sayyid Qutb, who has been mentioned earlier today. And it's clear, if you listen to his cassettes, his video cassettes, his books, you'll see that he was inspired by a lot of people. And one of the people he was inspired about was the family of Sayyid Qutb. He often would quote them. And just one of the quotes, just to mention, he says about them was that he would take his resolution that at the end when he was just before he was being executed, and like the brother mentioned, the sister of Sayyid Qutb came to Sayyid Qutb and said to him that why don't you just say sorry? Why don't you do this so that so they will let you off? It's clear that your loss will be a great loss to the Muslim Ummah as a whole. And Sayyid Qutb, he made his famous stance, and he said that one of the things he said that he says, upon which thing shall I make my plea for, Ya Hamida? If it has to do with the work with the Lord of the worlds, then wallahi, I will not make any compromises whatsoever. But if it was to do with anything else but that, then I would have done so. And he said further that if my execution has been written for me, then no matter, there's nothing that can stop it happening. If it's not been written for me, then nothing will stop it anyway. And he would often say that what kind of iman, what kind of iman can make a man have a stance like this? Because at the end of the day, death is the ultimate reality. And it was during this time he continued to try to participate with the jihad in Palestine, but eventually he began to realize that the people the PLO as such, who were the majority of people who were trying to revive, trying to get back Palestine from the Yahud, they were people who were not serious. They were not people who were willing to really sacrifice. They were not really people upon the manhaj of the Salaf as-Salih. They would spend the nights playing cards. They would listen to music, okay, and they would think that this is the way of the Mujahideen. No, this has never been the way of the Mujahideen. And he would say that from the thousands of people in the settlements, only a few people would offer salah in jama'ah. While if it was a case of Mujahideen, all of them would do it, and those who wouldn't do it, as you know, they get punished. And he tried his best to reform these people, okay, but they wouldn't have it, until one of the people who was quite prominent amongst them, he said that this revolution has no religion behind it. A prominent person from PLO, and he said this was the last straw for him. He was then offered a post in King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah as a teacher, and he took it, and he began teaching in King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah. But at the same time, it's quite clear from his writings that he's still very restless. He still wants to do more than this. He still sees that teaching is not the end all be all of an Islamic scholar. And he would often be quoted as saying that jihad and the rifle alone, no negotiations, no conferences, and no dialogue. This was the result. This was the conclusion that he had come towards. And it was here that he first met Osama bin Laden, and it was here that they say this is where he first began to speak and tell people about jihad and its importance. And this is where he first influenced the Shaykh Osama bin Laden. And like I said earlier, really, if you look at every great person, every Muslim hero, you'll see that there are people that have inspired them in one way or another. This has always been the case. You just have to look into their life to see who's inspired them and what they learned from it. And it was here in this time that he had the opportunity to meet some of the Afghan Mujahideen in the time of Hajj. And a delegation had come from Afghanistan to do Hajj, and they started to tell people about what's going on, the atrocities that are happening in Afghanistan, and how the people, they want Islam, and come join us. And he immediately quit. He quit as a lecturer in King Abdulaziz University, and he joined the International Islamic University in Islamabad as a lecturer. Him being a man who's a recognized scholar, having distinctions, it was not a problem for him to become a teacher at any Islamic university. And his aim to going to Islamabad was basically that he could come close to the jihad in Afghanistan and begin to know the leaders and begin to see whether are these people serious or not. Before I commit myself fully to these people, are these like another PLO people, or are these the people who are really from Mujahideen, sincere towards Allah? And after a short time, he realized that these people were sincere, and he realized that there's a lot of fruit to be gained here. So he quit his post. He put forward his letter of resignation, and he quit his post as a lecturer in the university in Islamabad, and he began to devote himself fully to the Afghanistan jihad. And he would say that it was statements like, it was statements like the statement of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that standing for an hour in the ranks of battle waged for the sake of Allah is better than standing in prayer for 60 years. It was statements like that inspired him. So eventually he brought his family to Pakistan, and from Pakistan he moved. This is an Arab scholar. He moved his family from Islamabad to Peshawar. So this was not a man who sacrificed part time. He was a fully committed man. And slowly he began to get to know the situation there, and he began to become more and more prominent amongst the Mujahideen there. And eventually, as the Mujahideen started coming in, he founded with his dear friend Osama bin Laden Baytul Ansar, okay, which is basically a bureau that was set up to assist the people who are coming from outside, the Mujahideen coming from outside, in different aspects. For example, training, okay, tarbiyah, coordination, projects, different things, just so that when they come in, they want people, because you have to realize is that the Mujahideen, they're a voluntary force. Okay, so a lot of them therefore don't have training, they don't know what they're going into. They need guidance, and he therefore, he thought that this is what he needs to do. So he set up this project to facilitate the matter, and also eventually he became the main focus point for questions. from all around the world, questions would come to him, his name, because since he was a recognized scholar, there was no, people could ask him questions, and he had the authority to give fatwas, to reply to their questions. And at the same time, he wasn't a person who just sat in the back line. Okay, he was a person who would go to the front, and he would travel all over Afghanistan, from north to south, over mountains, riding donkeys, on foot. And it was said that even young men would tire with such exertions, but Shaykh Abdullah Azzam, no, he wouldn't tire. And he himself participated in some of the battles against the Russians. Among them was one of the most fiercest of battles, was the one in Jaji in 1987, the Ramadan of 1987. And he saw it as a sheikh. It was his job to facilitate the matter in every single way for the jihad in Afghanistan, in a way that no one else could do that. So one of the things he began doing was he began to write down firsthand the kiramat, the miracles of the mujahideen, and he began to record them. Okay, because as been said earlier, that the miracles, they increase as the iman decreases. So the miracles they saw there, the tabi'een, the sahaba, they never saw, and he wrote them down. So that it became, so those who wish to read about what happened, they can read about it without, knowing that a scholar wrote this, and it wasn't just someone writing this out of emotion. And in Peshawar, he would give lectures, to inspire the people, to tell the people whenever there's any problems concerning the Mujahideen, especially you have to realize that the Mujahideen, they are a force of voluntary people from different cultures. So when different cultures meet, there are always going to be a lot of misunderstandings. He was there to sort it out. He was the focus point for them. And he also participated in trying to unite the Mujahideen commanders. And he would say, one of the things he would say was that the Muslims can never be defeated by others. We Muslims are not defeated by our enemies, but instead we are defeated by our own selves. And history, has shown this again and again and again. That in fact it's Muslims that defeat themselves. And he would also participate with other leaders of other Islamic groups like Ikhwan, Jama'atul Islamiyah. He would participate with them to coordinate activities to make the jihad in Afghanistan as powerful as it can be. And so more and more so, he began, the jihad, as the jihad began to influence him, he influenced the jihad itself, as him becoming more and more central point for a lot of things. And he also travelled, and I have some of the photos, inshallah, which I'll show the people some of the deeds I'm talking about. But he also travelled. He travelled to America, he travelled to Germany, he travelled to Malaysia. He travelled to recruit people, to tell people things, and he would tell people things firsthand. So that then therefore there was left no doubt upon the person, who wanted to act, and whoever didn't want to act, not to act. He would destroy all doubts. So for many he became a role model. Okay, and he became a very prominent leader. And also, like I said, he became a very prominent person. And he would say things that that can only be said by a person who's been inspired by the very front of jihad. Because you have to realize that the people of the Mujahideen, they're always at spiritual levels that's way beyond anyone else. They always see things of reality, because the more taqwa you have, the more reality you can see. And he would come up with comments that, very small comments that would yet have very deep meanings. Okay? And inshallah I will go through some of the quotes, but one of the things he would say often, that indeed Islamic history is not written except with the blood of the shuhada, except with the stories of the shuhada, and except with examples of the shuhada. And if you go through Islamic history, you will see that this is the case. You look at the Sahaba, the first generation. You look at them, what they did as soon as Prophet passed away. They committed themselves to jihad fully. And he wrote many books, making very complicated matters very easy. He wrote the books, books I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, like Join the Caravan, Signs of Rahman in the Jihad of Afghanistan, Defense of the Muslim Lands, Lovers of the Paradise Maiden, Lovers of the Maidens of Paradise, Ruling of Working in an Islamic Group, Islam and the Future of Mankind, Tafsir of Surah Tawbah. All of these books, all of these things, it was at a spiritual level that if you read about it, right, you see clearly that he's made very complicated things very easy. And at the same time, he established a magazine so that people all around the world could find out about the jihad firsthand. And he himself set this up. It's called Jihad. It's from this magazine that a lot of stuff I've taken as well. So he established this. He established a monthly magazine. And he also established a weekly magazine, a weekly pamphlet that would go out. Again, making sure that no matter whatever, information goes out from the kuffar to discredit the Muslims, they had an easy made reference that the Muslims could go back to find out what the truth was for those who wish to find the truth. And just go through one of his books, for example, Ilhaq bil Qawatil. He joined the caravan, which was originally written in 1987. Then he did the second print in 1988. He writes that it did not come to my mind that while I was writing this book, this treatise, that it would bring about such a great revolution, so that our numbers would increase close to tenfold. This is how much his small book, it's not a book of fiqh, a massive book of fiqh. It was a small book of fiqh, talking about the essentials a person needs, to inspire him and to get rid of all doubts. So the first thing he talks about, for example, is the reasons for jihad. He lists 16 reasons that would destroy your reason to do anything else. And then he talks about the obligations of jihad and how the Salaf did jihad. And he writes some notes about those who are coming to jihad, what they need to think about. And then he wrote about some issues of jihad that are confusing. Because you have to realize that whenever there's sincere work, there are people to confuse the matter. And unfortunately, a lot of the confusion will come from governmental scholars. They will try to confuse the matter. Is it jihad? No, it's not really jihad. We don't have Islamic Khalifa. This and that. And he would write as a person who's got a PhD in Usul al-Fiqh, as a recognized scholar, to destroy these things. And so therefore the people who are looking for someone sincerity and also looking for someone from knowledge, these doubts will be destroyed. So he had a unique ability in making hard concepts easy, to make confusing matters easy, and yet do it in very small books. And also going through his defense of Muslim lands, what he did with that was that he went to the recognized scholars of the world. Okay, because a lot of people, there were a lot of sincere people saying, so and so scholar hasn't said anything about this, or so and so scholar hasn't said anything about this. So he went to them personally. And for any of you who have been to a place like Saudi Arabia, to meet people is actually very hard. Make an appointment, this, that. But he did this. He went and he met so many different scholars, and he went to a gathering of scholars, and he made them sign. He said, if you agree with me, you sign. And they signed it. So therefore, again, destroying doubts amongst the people. So he changed the minds. He changed, the minds of the Muslims concerning the jihad, and because of that, the numbers, they increase manyfold. And one of the things he said at this time was that the jihad, it must not be abandoned until Allah alone is worshipped. And jihad, it will continue until Allah's word is raised high. And jihad, it will continue until all the oppressed people are freed. And jihad is there to protect our dignity and to restore our occupied lands. And jihad is the way of everlasting glory. He believed in this. He believed in this statement, and he went out and fought, and he sacrificed his whole life for this. And he himself, he also inspired his whole family towards this as well. And like I said to you, not only did he bring his immediate family towards here, he also brought his father, okay, who at this time, if he was in his 50s, Shaykh Abdullah Azzam, in his 40s, his father's obviously in his 70s, but he brought him also to Peshawar, because he saw that this is not only best for me, for my dunya, my akhirah, it was best for them as well. And later on, he would say that I feel that I'm only 9 years old, 7.5 years in the Afghan jihad and 1.5 years in the jihad of Palestine, and the rest of my years have been of no value. So he's saying no value to the amount of time he spent studying Sharia, to the time he spent giving da'wah, to the time he spent trying to gain his PhD in Usul al-Fiqh. It shows the level of commitment that he reached towards. And at the same time, he was offered positions at different universities, to come back, come and teach here. You can have a high post wherever you want. But he said a very famous statement towards these type of offers. He said that لن أترك أرض الجهاد إلا بإحدى ثلاث إما أن أقتل في أفغانستان أو أقتل في بشاور أو أخرج مقبلا من Pakistan. Which means that never shall I leave the land of jihad except in 3 cases. And this shows his resolution towards his matter. He says, either I shall be killed in Afghanistan, or I shall be killed in Peshawar, or either I shall be handcuffed and expelled from Pakistan. is one of these three things. So this is what he saw was his future, and it so happens that one of these things happened. Again, it shows his spiritual highness. And he also used to reiterate that, and he made it clear to the people, and this enraged the enemies of Islam, that he said that after we established the Islamic State in Afghanistan, my aim then is to liberate Palestine. And a lot of people, they used to blame him. They used to say to him that, why is it that you've left? Why is it that you've left Palestine for Afghanistan? You're Palestinian. Why don't you go there? Why don't you stay there and inspire them? And he says, by Allah, the one besides there is no God but He. Afghanistan is not more dearer to me, more beloved to me than Palestine. Neither is Kabul more precious to me than Khalil, which is a city in Palestine. Rather, it was an opportunity that I availed myself to after the transgressors drove me out and came between me and spreading the word of Allah, the Lord of the worlds, in Palestine. So I went out into the world looking for a way to do some activity, jihad. And so then he says, so why are you reproaching me? By Allah, indeed Palestine is in our hearts and is in our tongues. And truly Palestine is part of our aqeedah, is part of our religion, and it is in our heart and our tongues. And the Muslims, they will never forget it. And at the same time, while giving all these speeches, all these darses, being a very businessman, he was an excellent example in piety, his devotion to Allah and his modesty in all things. People say that he had a very good ability to listen to the youth. Okay, he wasn't someone who thought himself too big, to listen to smaller people. And for this reason, he was very much loved by the people, wherever he went. And he was also, like I said, a very brave person. And he not only did he talk, but he committed himself to jihad, and he actually did jihad himself. And he would practice the fasting of Dawood alayhi salam, which is fasting on alternate days. And one of the things he would tell the people to fast either on Monday or Thursday. And also, one of the things he was very much remembered for is his adhkar. He would always be found doing adhkar. And in fact, I've got a picture of him with a tasbih. And in fact, he would say he would one of the times he was talking about tasbih, he would say to people that how is it possible for any of you to do some jogging and make adhkar, and say Subhanallah 33 times, Allah Akbar 33 times, Alhamdulillah 33 times. No, it's very difficult, and in fact, it is very difficult to jog and make adhkar like this. Okay, but he then said that if you were to have tasbih, you could do this. And in fact, for those of you who have ever tried it, you'll see that if you have a tasbih and you're jogging, you can do this Subhanallah 33 times, Allah Akbar 33 times, Alhamdulillah 33 times. And he would counsel his sons. He would say to them that build for yourselves trees in paradise by saying Subhanallah wa bihamdihi Subhanallah al-Azim. His own children say that he used to say this a lot to them. And even the people who didn't like it from the Muslims, later on, they admit that this man indeed, his character, his quality, his manners were indeed very high. One such group was a group of people who were staying in Peshawar, who began to claim that this man, he was squandering the wealth of the Muslims. And since these people themselves, they were there, right? They were sincere people doing work, and they needed wealth, they needed money. He would send money to them for this. And many years on, despite the fact that they used to abuse him and say to him that he's wasting the money of the Muslims, which he didn't. When they realized their mistake later on, they are quoted as saying that by Allah, we never saw anyone like Shaykh Abdullah Azzam. He would continue to send money to us even though we were swearing to him and abusing him. So basically, he didn't take things personally. When it was work, it was work. You can say whatever you want to him, it was work. And his wife, she says about him and his commitment to the work. And this is something she says afterwards, after he has been shaheed, because as you know, since he was basically the media of the jihad in Afghanistan, and you can't praise a person to his face, it's very hard for people to say these type of things about him. She says, and I'm quoting her directly, she says that when asked about his life, she says in the house, she says that he was not a man who used to spend much time with us, because he used to devote his whole time to the Muslims and towards jihad. He would leave his house at Fajr and return at midnight. And even if he came back, in the day, he came back for some specific reason, or he came back with some guests and some of the brothers in the jihad. and he would sit with them, and then after that he would leave. And we used to know about him, from the news of the jihad, and we used to hear about him from the deeds that people said about him, and from the cassettes, and from the magazines, and from the books. He was an international recognized figure. And we used to hear about him, we used to hear about him from the brothers. And also he was somebody who did not love the dunya. He did not love the pleasures of this dunya. And he did not like to and he was not pleased with except with the easy things and the things that were essential. Ashay al-dururi. From the things that are pleasurable. And she says that he was a person that had divorced the dunya, and he would have thrown it behind his back, even regarding presents. Okay? Even if these presents were expensive or simple. For he used to say to me that it's better that we give these presents out themselves as presents, because anything that is extra, and it's not from the things that are essential, he said we don't need it. We only need essential things. He would maintain this zuhud, and you can see why from statement like this, why the brother said to you earlier, the call I made earlier, that he had the zuhud of Ibn al-Mubarak, and he was someone who hated ghiba. He knew that ghiba, backbiting, it would destroy the Muslim community. And he's got cassettes and videos on this. And he would hate anybody coming to him with bad sayings about any of the people. Okay? And even if these things were true, he would hate to hear about it, really. And this is what ghiba is, in fact. And she continues to say that he was not a person who would talk, that I heard him saying evil things about people, but rather, if someone said evil thing about it, he would defend them and he would give them excuses. And he was somebody who would love people to, he would love to joke sometimes, but he would only like people to joke with jokes that were truthful. And she says that he used to give tarbiyah to the children, and this is an important lesson for us, for our children as well, inshallah. With good manners and guarding of the tongue. And he would say to them, for example, he would say to his children sometimes that if they were quiet for 1 hour and didn't say anything, that I will give you 100 rupees. So for 1 hour, you're quiet, you contemplate, I'll give you 100 rupees. And he would say to them sometime that he would say to them that increase the agriculture, increase the fruits for you in Jannah by saying Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi Subhanallahi al-Azim. This is what he would say to children. Increase your trees in paradise. Increase it now. And he would say to them that if they were to memorize a page from the Quran, he would give them 50 rupees. So he's always encouraging them. And she says that he would do this so that he would encourage them, and therefore to encourage them so that they do not waste their time with anything except for things that were beneficial. So we find here, right, a Shaykh who not only on the outward is he a person true to his word, but on the inward, from his family, from his wife, she's saying this, that he's a man who's true to his word. And then in 1989, which is the last year of the Shaykh himself, and in this year, the Russians, it's becoming quite clear that they were being expelled, they were being defeated, despite that, the enemies of the Muslims, they still had other enemies as well, from communists that were within Pakistan, within Peshawar, within Afghanistan itself, not from the Russians themselves. They had other enemies from the West, and it was clear that the enemies, they were lurking in the behind the scenes. And in November '99, the first attempt they made upon him was that they placed TNT explosives underneath the pulpit from which he was about to give khutbah. And this was such a large amount that had it exploded, it would destroy the whole mosque. This is how ruthless his enemies were. And just before that, the last lecture he gave, that's recorded, was the one in November 8, 1989, and he gave this in Lahore. And I thought inshallah we'd quickly just cover some of the main points. Because these were the main points that he was telling the Muslims before he was assassinated, inshallah. He was shaheed. The first thing he says in this quote, I mean, this is entitled "Mada Turidun," what do you want? But the first thing I'll only mention the main points that we can learn from this lecture. But the first thing he says is that he starts by praising Allah, giving peace and blessings upon His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he quotes the verse, and fight them until there is no fitna, and the religion itself is all for Allah. And then he says, the first thing he says is that, the first priority from the Muslims is that they must prioritize the Islamic work. You must prioritize your Islamic work. Without that, you will achieve nothing. The second lesson that he says, I'm only covering the main points. He says, is that really there will be no tawheed. There will be no real worship of Allah without the Muslims having a land that they can defend, and they can propagate Islam properly, and that people who are attacked for their religion, they can come towards. You will never have tawheed in the world. You will never really establish the religion. And he also says that really you will only achieve this land. There's only one way to achieve the land, and that's the way the Prophet ﷺ achieved this. In the fact that he migrated to Medina, he established the land there himself. Just like that, when the opening comes, like it was coming there, Afghanistan was that opening. Just the way the Prophet ﷺ had opening Medina, you go there and you start working there. And just as Prophet ﷺ, he had a lot of problems there in the beginning. So do we. This is our land. And the third point he said was that the biggest miracle that the Muslims have had in the last 3 centuries is that is the defeat of the kuffar, because the Muslims for a long time they have been unable to defeat the kuffar, and for that reason they become humiliated again and again and again. And he would often say that the Muslims the people who don't make jihad, they are not a people. And then the fourth thing he said in this lecture was that he starts to quote the West in the fact that what a big thing that the West they're trying to say that it was we are the ones who defeated the Russians. But he says no, it was we who did it, not them. Don't let them confuse the matter. If we did it out of our own money, we fought them ourselves. It's us who did it. So he was a man who used to read what the West was saying. And he then said what the role of the Muslim, what the role of the Western media is towards jihad and the Muslims generally. And he said there were 3 points. He said that the first point was to make the jihad, go from something that's global to something that's local. This is just a local war. This is the first thing that Western media are trying to do. Second thing he said was that they were trying to wipe away, the jihad from the people. They're trying to say that this is a local thing. This is a local internal fight, nothing to do with jihad. And the third thing they're trying to do is via these confusions, they're trying to make people stop. They're trying to stop people from coming to the jihad itself. So he's very switched on to what's going on in the world, what the Western media are trying to do, and he would warn the people towards this. And the fifth thing he says is that what now do the Muslims want? We have so many. We have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us such a huge blessing here in Afghanistan. It's now for the Muslims to just take it. We have weapons. We have people who care. We have the leaders who care for Islam. We have the land. Now it's just for us to take it. The next point he covers quickly is that that indeed there will be no more opportunities like this for a long time to come if you don't take it. If the Muslims don't take this opportunity, when will they take the opportunity? When will they take the chance if they don't seize this chance? And then he talks about the situation, what's happening, which is not something I'm going to go into right now. But then he again mentions the point that the time is right, the time is now. And it's always, if you look at Islamic history, it's the few. And he'd always mention it, it's the few people, it's always the few people who start something. So if you join the few, this is where the blessing is. And he also would say that, and the next point he mentioned was that the results that will happen with jihad in every single front will never happen with any other work. The way the amount we can achieve with jihad, and the amount we've achieved with jihad, and for example, he says in the last 10 years, even in 20 years, if you do it via other means, right, via democracy, try to gain Islam, right, that type of thing, you'll never achieve it. And he basically he's saying that a lot of Muslim groups they think of different ways to try to achieve the Islamic State. This is all just playing games. You'll never achieve it like you'll achieve it this way. Then he mentioned about statistics so far of jihad, of how many airplanes they've destroyed, how many cars they've destroyed. And again, this shows the power of the Mujahideen, to let the people know. Again, he's inspiring the Mujahideen. And again, the next one he mentions is that the Mujahideen, they are in need of money, and it's for the Muslims, it's for their own benefit to sacrifice. And he would often say, the jihad is not in need of men, but men are in need of jihad. Men are in need of the jihad. And the last thing he says is that, look, take this opportunity and come forward, okay, and participate, because you will not get another opportunity like this. So come forward. Oh, journalists, come forward. Engineers, come forward. Electricians, come forward. Doctors, come forward. Surgeons, come forward. People who the scholars. So that was some of the main key points he said in his last lecture, given in Lahore just a few weeks before he was shaheed. Now the actual event of when he was shaheed. On the night of November 24th, which was Thursday night, Friday was November 24th, he had spent pretty much most of the night with Rabbani, and a lot of it with Hikmah, discussing with them how to make peace between the two groups. Okay, because like I said, right, he was an instrumental point in bringing the Mujahideen together, and he had in fact made them sign a contract, ahad, a pledge, and it was his intention to announce this pledge in the Jumu'ah, in the Salat al-Jumu'ah, in his khutbah. So he spent most of the night doing this, okay, and then in the morning he got up, he got himself ready for after Fajr. Obviously he went to sleep. He got up, he prayed Salat al-Duha. His children described him that he washed himself, put on new clothes. In fact, he wore new clothes that day. That he was wearing for the first time ever, okay. And he sat with his children for a little while, heard them recite some of the Quran. This is the Friday of November 24th. And then he with his two sons, Muhammad, whose age was 20, and Ibrahim, whose age was 15, they got into a car, and this car they had never ever driven before. This is the first time they were driving this car. Okay, and all these points are important, as you've seen, inshallah. Okay, and then they started to go, and as they were going through a street called Jamud, which is one of the main streets, they were turning to a small side road. A 20-kilogram bomb, and I think just before this, a little while, Shaykh Abdullah got off to walk beside the car, and just before this, a 20-kilogram bomb exploded, and the amount of TNT used here is the amount they used to kill, actually, to destroy tanks. This is the amount of TNT they used. It exploded, destroying, totally separating the bodies of his two sons, so much so that they found parts of their bodies 100 meters away. The body of Shaykh Abdullah Azzam, it itself was untouched. It was something. It seems that he was shaheed from the blast itself of the explosion. He wasn't himself torn away. His leg wasn't dismembered. He was dismembered. It seemed that he died from internal bleed, internal hemorrhage. The brothers themselves, at this time when they all came out of the Jummah, because they were all waiting for the khutbah, they came out, they saw what had happened, they saw the Shaykh, they immediately took him to the hospital. They got to the hospital, and there, is either on the way or at the hospital itself, he was shaheed. And so the life of one of the greatest heroes that's walked in the last century, definitely, he was shaheed, assassinated by the enemies of the Muslims. Immediately the news is spread that night itself. They buried the Shaykh Abdullah Azzam in Pabi graveyard. The news itself is spread like like fire. It spread around the world. It caused a great upset at the time. He was at this time 58 years of age. If he had been alive today, he would have been roughly 72. And in fact, one day before this actually happened, because like I said to you, there was a tent before that. One of the brothers said to him, that should we not make for you some kind of a bulletproof vest, something, some type of protection for you? And the brother, he says that Shaykh Abdul Azzam, he stopped, he thought for a little while, he smiled and he said that I have no need for it. And then he quoted the verse, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم. That say that verily the death that you are trying to flee from is verily going to reach you. That say the death that you are trying to run away from is going to reach you. I.e., that death, whenever it comes straight for me. Whenever it's straight for me, it's straight for me. So he said, no, I have no need for this. And on that night itself, all the scholars, all the main people of the jihad of Afghanistan, they came, and the next 3 days, various people gave lectures. Some key points to be mentioned about this. Looking at his family, like I said to you before, looking at his family, just so that we can gain, because this thing about death, this is something that we need to get used to, and as people in the West, we are not used to it. But just to see the reaction of his family, of what they said, what happened when their beloved husband or father passed away. As for his wife, what she said, that when she was asked about him about his shahada, she said that verily I was always expecting something like this to happen, because people like him, they have many enemies. Okay, so I was expecting something like this to happen. And his enemies, they were planning day and night. So in that time itself, when it happened, I was in the kitchen, and when I heard this bomb, because this bomb, when it went up, it could be heard for more than 1 kilometer radius. It was such a humongous explosion. She says, and the main point I'm trying to get from here is her reaction and her sabr. She says that I was in the kitchen, and when I heard this bomb, and this was only 5 minutes after he left the house, that something in my heart, your father. And she says that when she then eventually found out what happened, she said, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." And she says that I said Alhamdulillah, but the thing that really concerned me a bit was that I was a bit scared of my other children, because I didn't want them to be shaheed except in the front line. My other 2 children, I did not want them to be shaheed except in the front line. This is her himself saying this. But she says, "Walakin qaddara Allahu sabaq walhamdulillah ala kulli hal." She's a bit disappointed at the fact that they weren't shaheed at the front line. They're shaheed in this way. And I've already mentioned to you some of the things, what kind of person he was, in the house. Going towards his other son, Hudhayfa, who's roughly 15. Okay. Just to see his reaction towards what happened. He said that in that morning itself, I had planned to go with my other brother Ibrahim to do some sports. But my father said to me that we can't go before we read Surah Al-Kahf and do some adhkar and after Jummah. So once we had done this, we had planned to do all this. And eventually, he did a few things. He came back to the house, and he saw that his father, he was writing this, he was just writing his khutbah, and he had this paper, and this is the paper that I'm talking about. This is the treaty. He says, I don't know exactly what he wrote in this treaty, but it was basically a treaty of peace between Rabbani and Hikmachair. And Hikmachair, as we know, joined he traded amongst Muslims, and he joined the Shias later on. And the Rabbani, unfortunately, he joined the Americans, the Northern Alliance. And again, this is an important point for us, because Shaykh Abdullah Azzam, he's very crucial. He's very crucial in bringing the Mujahideen commanders together. And a lot of people have said that if there had been other scholars, right, to take his place, then the work would have continued. But the Muslim heroes, there are very few of the scholars who take up this type of sacrifice. and just continuing, just to say some of the key points. Just to say some of the key points that he says about him. He says about the Shaykh. He says about his father. He says that it was very rare that we would sit with our father in the house, because we would only see him very little. He was always doing the work, and whenever we would see him, his tongue would always be in the remembrance of Allah and jihad, and he would also always be trying to put in us the love of jihad, of shahada, into our hearts. And he would have no other more important concern than this concern. And he would always encourage us to memorize the Quran. And Hudhayfa himself, he was a Sharia student in Amman, and this was his main thing, and that was his reaction. Just to go to his reaction of his youngest son, who is 5. He says, and the point I'm trying to gain here, right, is because if you look at the majority of children today, right, the majority of 5-year-olds, right, they're into Teletubbies, they're into, Spider-Man, they're into, David Beckham. I just want to make people think. I just want people to realize this is the way how a son of a hero should be thinking. The interviewer, he says to him that, where's your father? Where were you born? He says, I was born in Islamabad. The interviewer, he says to him that, what's your original country? He says, Mus'ab, his name, he says, Palestine. He says, where's your father? He goes, my father right now, he's in paradise. He goes, the interviewer, they say to him, this is a 5-year-old saying this. He says, who killed your father? He goes, Mus'ab goes, that the kuffar, they killed my father. He goes, how did they kill him? They say they put a bomb underneath his car. So he knows what's going on. He's not somebody, they said, put him to the side. He's just a young boy. He knows what's going on. He goes, who was with him at the time? He goes that Muhammad and Ibrahim are his 2 elder brothers, and they are also in paradise with my father right now. And this is aqidah, ingrained, immersed in his heart. And وَلَا نُزَكِّي عَلَى اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. And the interviewer then says that, do you wish to join them? He goes, yes, I wish to die as a shaheed, and then they will take me to the qabr, and then Sayyidina Jibreel, he will come to me, and inshallah, and he will then take me to paradise. This is the aqidah of a 5-year-old. And then the interviewer says to him that, what do you want to do before you're a shaheed? He goes, I want to, he says that I want to be killed the way my father was killed. And then they say to him that, what did your mother do when she heard about the shahada? Musab, he says, and he's a 5-year-old, therefore he's only tell the truth. He says, قالت مبروك, that she said that blessed, be blessed. And then the interviewer says that have you been to Afghanistan? Because they listed him for a shower. And he goes, yes, I've been 3 times. So 3 times this 5-year-old has been to Afghanistan, the land of jihad. And he goes, and then they say to him, who's your example? And here he didn't say David Beckham or something stupid like that. He goes, my father, he's my example. And he goes, do you make dua for your father? He goes, yes. I say, Ya Rabb adkhilhu Jannah. So this is just to give you, this is the son of a hero. Just to quickly mention why he was killed. I mean, it's obvious why he was killed, and all the reasons I've mentioned already were the reasons why he was killed. But just to add to that, just some of the statements, and this is some of the brothers they wrote to reply to why he was killed. Some of his statements. One of the statements he said that he was famous for was that he said that verily the political solution that Americans and the Russians are trying to go towards solving the problems of the Muslims, this is false. And this is prohibited shar'an, this is prohibited via intelligence. Okay? And we have learned from our experiences in Palestine, because and Palestine, the fear of Palestine is still going on, the problem of Palestine is still going on. Okay? And other places that the only solution that is possible for us is the sounds of the guns. And if we were to take this matter to the national gatherings or like UN and that type of thing, then this would actually mean sending these matters to the rubbish bin. Okay, this is what you talk about political solution, what a lot of Muslims think about. And this would mean sending these problems to his expected certain death. Another of his statements, he said, verily we have done the farida, and he thought the farida, farida's obligation of, he said that we have fulfilled the obligation of the ibadah of jihad in Palestine, and then something came between us and it, i.e. this ibadah, and then so we looked around in the world for another place that we could worship Allah with this ibadah of jihad, and we found the land of Afghanistan. And the last statement I will say about this statement, he says here that the mind will not be settled, and the determination will not be firm until we return to Palestine with jihad. And we have made it a duty upon ourselves that we will not go back from this tariq al-Rabbani. Rabbani means divine, and this divine way that has a root between it, Kabul, and Quds. So basically, all these things make very clear that basically his next aim after Afghanistan was Palestine itself. So inshallah, just to mention some of the main key points, i.e. the legacy he leaves behind. You know, his inspiration, I mean, if you listen to his lectures, like I said to you before, he would be always encouraging the people, and he would always remind the brothers that, look, even though we are few, history has shown itself that the heroes have always been a minority. You know, you look at the heroes that we've done today, for example, like Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, Imam Shafi, and there's a quote he says here in the beginning of this course. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, Imam Shafi'i, Al-Izz bin Abdul Salam, Al-Nawawi, Sayyid Qutb, Hassan al-Banna, Abdul Aziz al-Badri, Salih al-Sirriya. He says, what eternalized their memories, what sustained their mention, how were their names written in books? Indeed, the pages of history are few, and in them are not written except the names of great people. And how did these names reach this level except with their actions, except with their jihad, except with their sacrifices, and except with their steadfastness? This was his legacy. He was telling the people, look, these are the heroes, the examples there, we just need to take it. You know, you will always be a few, so don't worry if you are in the minority. And because of this, he inspired every place. Okay, there's not a place he did not inspire. And if you were to look at his will, which is readily available in the books, there are many great lessons that a person can learn from them. Okay, and he sends this lesson towards, you know, the first thing he mentions is the obligation of jihad, and he says a small lesson towards the scholars. He says something to the Muslim generally. He says something to the women themselves, to the Muslim women. But basically, you know, he has a lot of wisdom in what he says. Small statements that have a lot of wisdom. And it's just some of the other statements that, inshallah, I will end by. And you will see this in the lives of the Muslims. One of the statements he says is that we have seen that much education with the accompanying of suppression of good deeds brings about a cold heart, a slackened determination, and a greed for life which argues unfeelingly and feebly, gets evidence by way of barren disputation. I.e., people who have a lot of education, you see them, they argue. Why? Because these people, these type of educated people, and you see this especially amongst the intellectual West. Okay, but yet, you know, they're willing to argue, debate, discuss. But when it comes to doing things, they are the people who slack. And he said, another of his statements about the few, he said, the men who know are few, and those who act are even fewer, and those who perform jihad are rarer and more scarce, and those who remain steadfast on this path are hardly sufficient to be mentioned. I mean, there are so few that, you know, in his books pretty much he's mentioned nearly everybody in his time. This is how few, and it's these few who do a lot of action, really. And the last statement I will say before I end, and again, you know, there's a lot of hikmah, you know, you see that he reached, there's a lot of wisdom he reached because of the deeds he did. He says that we have seen that the land of Islam is still fertile, giving its produce at all times by its Lord's leave. And whenever the plantations find a person of insight to serve as a trustworthy administrator, you know, then the work begins. And then he says something, and this is inshallah a lesson for everybody here. He says that this ummah only lacks exemplars, i.e., people to give the example, to lead the journey sincerely, who are well acquainted with mobilizing and exploration. Anything we do, a task, the main problem this work has is that people, you know, it needs a few people to think this is what needs to happen. Use the resources whatever you have and just do the matter. Who are well acquainted with mobilizing and exploration, whatever work it is, and who give priority to noble people, and who give priority to commissioning of leadership. And then he says, in proportion to the determined ones come determinations. I.e., the more determined people are, you know, the more likewise you'll get determination like it. So if you are extremely determined, you'll get other people, you know, who are also extremely determined. But if you're slack, all you'll get is other slack people. So really look at yourselves. And in proportion to noble people comes noble deeds. And in the eye of little ones, in the eye of little ones, the small misfortune appears tremendous, and in the eyes of the mighty are great distresses. So basically, you know, it's all in the eye of the beholder. You know, if you look at for some people, right, you know, a small thing can be a big thing, while for people who are really big, you know, have a big heart, who are these people who have set example, great distresses, you know, it's nothing to them. They just carry on the way. An example I've already given you, for example, the way his wife reacted. Inshallah, to end, I would say that I've got a lot of photos of different things he was doing, and people want to see them, they can inshallah see them. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت واستغفرك واتوب اليك.